The story you've been told about the Maiden Tower is more legend than fact. Deep in Baku's Ikarashir, this 28-meter-tall stone structure has puzzled historians for centuries. No one knows exactly when it was built, and the name of the architect has been lost in time. Scholars have debated its purpose for generations. Some say it was a watchtower, others a religious temple, or even a water reservoir. Yet, none of these explanations fully fit its design. The entrance is on the third floor, not the ground level, unusual for any defensive or religious structure. Inside, 8 circular levels contain ledges with grooves, details that seem unnecessary for a temple or fortress. And surrounding the tower, there are underground chambers once called baths, with no plumbing but clear evidence of high heat and soot. The more you study it, the more it becomes clear that the tower was not just a monument, it was part of a complex system of production and technology that existed in this region long before modern records. Archaeological studies show that Baku and its surroundings have been a center of oil extraction for centuries, and traces of industrial activity date back further than the official history books admit. This structure, with its thick walls, internal channels, and underground connections, hints at a civilization with advanced engineering knowledge. It managed heat, controlled liquids, and possibly processed petroleum products on an industrial scale. The romantic stories about the maiden locked in the tower likely came much later, invented to hide the tower's real historical function. Even the tower's design reflects advanced understanding of natural forces. The Maiden Tower slightly tilts toward the Caspian Sea, and its massive buttress faces east. This wasn't accidental. Engineers in the past clearly understood wind patterns. Baku is famous for strong seasonal winds, the kilovar from the south and the Khazri from the north. The buttress's ribbed, porous masonry maximized airflow and natural cooling, a critical feature if heat or flammable materials were being managed inside. At each of the 8 levels, liquids or substances could be heated, condensed, or drained safely through carefully placed channels and ceramic pipes, which were resilient to chemical corrosion and high temperatures. Even the windows serve a purpose beyond light, they provide safe observation of the interior, allowing workers to monitor processes without endangering themselves. Modern industrial design uses the same principles. Thick walls for safety, airflow for cooling, multiple levels for separation, observation points, and controlled input and output of raw materials, all present in a tower centuries old. Nearby structures reinforce this idea. Underground furnaces, misidentified as baths, and wells designed with precision drilling and early piping suggest that this region was already operating a sophisticated industrial system long before conventional history recognizes such technology. Historical texts hint at massive oil transport, with caravans or other systems moving tons of fuel every day. The people of Baku weren't simply collecting oil, they were controlling production, refining it, and distributing it systematically. Legends about maidens, astronomers, or holy fires were likely added later to mask the true purpose of these sites. When you study the physical evidence, the walls, the channels, the positioning, you begin to see that history has been simplified, romanticized, and partially hidden. If you're curious to dive deeper into these hidden histories, make sure to looking deeper into the surrounding area. The Maiden Tower wasn't an isolated structure. Archaeological studies show a network of circular towers, wells, and underground chambers spread across the Azerbaijan Peninsula. Each structure seems to follow the same architectural logic: thick walls, strategic openings, and evidence of heat exposure. Historians have long called these fortresses or baths, but the design doesn't fit those purposes. For example, the so-called baths have no proper sewage or plumbing, yet their walls are lined with ceramic channels capable of carrying heat and steam. Nearby wells were drilled with precision and sometimes lined with early pipes, showing an understanding of fluid mechanics and pressure control far beyond what is typically attributed to the period. Written sources from travelers and geographers of the 14th and 15th centuries describe large quantities of petroleum being shipped from Baku. Caravans, supposedly loaded with hundreds of barrels, suggest a well-organized distribution network. These records, combined with the physical evidence, indicate that Baku had an early form of industrial production, long before modern wells and refineries. The Maiden Tower, with its unusual entrance, multiple internal levels, and sophisticated internal channels, fits perfectly into this system. It likely played a central role in controlling production, separating materials, and maintaining safety. It wasn't a temple, it wasn't a fortress, and it certainly wasn't just a landmark. Instead, it was a hub of innovation and industrial activity, disguised over centuries by legends and romantic storytelling. Imagine walking through medieval Baku, seeing the blackened stones of the tower, the underground chambers, and the network of wells, knowing that people centuries ago were managing complex industrial processes without modern tools. The Maiden Tower becomes not just a monument, but a window into the technological prowess of the past. If you're enjoying the more we study the Maiden Tower, the more its location tells a story. Situated on the Azerbaijan Peninsula, it overlooks the Caspian Sea and sits near dozens of wells and ancient oil deposits. Historical accounts from the 14th century describe caravans transporting hundreds of barrels of oil from this region every day. While textbooks simplify this as crude oil gathered in buckets, archaeological evidence suggests a far more organized system. The tower itself may have served as a central hub for overseeing, processing, and controlling these operations. Its unusual entrance on the third floor could have been designed to manage materials safely, keeping workers away from the heaviest and most dangerous fractions below. The tower's internal levels, with their ledges and channels, may have allowed early engineers to separate different petroleum products using heat and gravity, a technique surprisingly sophisticated for the time. Surrounding structures, often misinterpreted as baths or small religious buildings, align perfectly with this theory. Underground furnaces and channels indicate the careful management of heat, while nearby wells show signs of systematic extraction. Even the thick, blackened stones of the tower suggest prolonged exposure to fire or high-temperature processes. The romantic story of a trapped maiden might have been a convenient way to explain the unusual tower in local folklore, but the historical evidence points to a different reality, a city with advanced knowledge of natural resources, engineering, and industrial management. This is the kind of history that textbooks rarely cover, yet it changes how we understand medieval urban centers. The people of Baku weren't just traders or artisans, they were early innovators in energy, chemistry, and engineering. The Maiden Tower stands as a silent testament to their ingenuity. If this fascinates you, make sure to subscribe to Within and click the bell to never miss a discovery. Comment your thoughts below. If we look closer at the architecture, the Maiden Tower reveals clues about Baku's long history of innovation. The walls at the base are 5 meters thick, narrowing only slightly at the top, far thicker than needed for a simple lookout or religious building. For comparison, even the walls of Constantinople, famous for withstanding sieges, were thinner. Such massive walls suggest the tower was designed to withstand extreme internal conditions, not external attacks. Inside, the 8 levels are connected not by normal floors but by circular ledges and channels, carefully carved to move liquids between levels. Archaeologists have found wells and pipes underneath and around the tower, suggesting that materials or liquids were transported with precision. Nearby underground structures, often labeled as baths, contain remnants of soot and traces of fuel, hinting at their use as furnaces or industrial heating systems. This shows that the area around the Maiden Tower wasn't just residential or religious, it was a hub of activity requiring engineering knowledge and careful planning. Historical records from the region indicate that Baku and the Azerbaijan Peninsula were known for oil resources even in medieval times. Travelers and geographers mention quantities of petroleum being transported from the city daily, long before modern wells existed. The tower's internal layout, its orientation, and the distribution of its openings make more sense in this context, as part of a sophisticated production or processing system rather than a temple or fortress. Even the legendary tales about princesses and fire seem to be symbolic, a romantic reinterpretation of industrial activity in later centuries. History, when studied carefully, shows that ancient civilizations often integrated technological and cultural life. The Maiden Tower could be a prime example, a building that served a practical, possibly industrial, purpose while later generations reinterpreted it as a monument. The story you've been told about the Maiden Tower is more legend than fact. Deep in Baku's Ikarashir, this 28-meter-tall stone structure has puzzled historians for centuries. No one knows exactly when it was built, and the name of the architect has been lost in time. Scholars have debated its purpose for generations. Some say it was a watchtower, others a religious temple, or even a water reservoir. Yet, none of these explanations fully fit its design. The entrance is on the third floor, not the ground level, unusual for any defensive or religious structure. Inside, 8 circular levels contain ledges with grooves, details that seem unnecessary for a temple or fortress. And surrounding the tower, there are underground chambers once called baths, with no plumbing but clear evidence of high heat and soot. The more you study it, the more it becomes clear that the tower was not just a monument, it was part of a complex system of production and technology that existed in this region long before modern records. Archaeological studies show that Baku and its surroundings have been a center of oil extraction for centuries, and traces of industrial activity date back further than the official history books admit. This structure, with its thick walls, internal channels, and underground connections, hints at a civilization with advanced engineering knowledge. It managed heat, controlled liquids, and possibly processed petroleum products on an industrial scale. The romantic stories about the maiden locked in the tower likely came much later, invented to hide the tower's real historical function. If you want to explore the true history behind the Maiden Tower and other ancient technological achievements, subscribe to Within Now and hit the bell. Comment your thoughts below. What do you think the tower was really used for? Share this video with friends who love history mysteries, because what you're about to see will challenge everything you thought you knew about the past.